You may think that you're about to hear today's one and only sermon, but in fact you've already heard a sermon, or at least a portion of one. Today's gospel lesson is a continuation of Jesus' sermon, which appears in both Matthew and Luke. There are some differences in the two versions. Luke's is shorter than Matthew's, and in Luke, the sermon is set on a plain rather than on a mountain. But the actual substance of the two accounts is very similar. And as sermons go, the substance of this one is as hard to digest as a mouthful of names. Our former neighbor from up in Hartford, Mark Twain, once commented that he'd heard people complain that the Bible is hard to understand. But Twain said he was bothered more by the parts of the Bible that he could understand than by the parts he could not understand. He was probably thinking about passages like today's gospel reading, where Jesus says, "Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. And pray for those who mistreat you." Scholars refer to these verses as examples of the hard sayings of Jesus. And yes, they are hard indeed. But Mark Twain would ask, is this saying of Jesus bothersome to us because it's hard to understand? Or is it bothersome to us because it's easy to understand and hard to obey? Perhaps it's some of both. You and I first need to understand who Jesus is referring to when he speaks of enemies. In our common vernacular, we use the word enemy rather loosely and lightly. The baseball season is upon us again, which means that the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox are about to resume the most heated rivalry in all of sports. Fans of both teams commonly refer to the other team as their arch enemy. But friends, baseball is just a highly competitive sport. It is not a war on terrorism. The Yankees and the Red Sox are fierce competitors, but it's overstating the case to say that they are enemies. The players in each dugout actually respect the players in the opposite dugout. They want to defeat their rivals, but they don't want to destroy them. If either opponent were destroyed, they could no longer enjoy the excitement of playing each other. And by the way, they would lose a ton of money in the process. Now, Jesus' sermon makes it clear. When he speaks of enemies, he's not referring to persons who merely compete with us or disagree with us or oppose us. He's referring to persons whose opposition to us turns nasty, hateful, and even violent. We all know that politics can be a pretty nasty business. During one of Franklin Roosevelt's campaigns for the presidency, the Democratic Party used an intriguing slogan in speaking about him. We love him for the enemies he's made. FDR supporters were noting that in matters of public policy, their candidate took strong positions that provoked strong opposition, and the opposition often got very personal. At one and the same time, Roosevelt was the most beloved and the most reviled politician in America. His supporters actually admired him for making enemies because it indicated that he stood for something truly meaningful. This leads me to ask myself, have I ever made a real enemy? Or had someone in my life who became my enemy for no good reason at all? The truth is, I've never had to deal with anyone who meant to cause me bodily harm or was hell-bent on destroying my career as a minister. I've never been physically persecuted as Jesus and his first followers were persecuted. This might lead you to guess that I've been playing my cards very carefully. Someday I may have to account for the fact that no one has ever thrown bricks at me for voicing my convictions, that I am not likely to die on a cross as a religious martyr, but will probably pass away peacefully of natural causes in my own bed. You may love me, but not for the enemies I've made. At the same time, I've certainly had people in my life who were thorns in my flesh, who didn't like me as a person, or who opposed something I said or did as a minister. And they were downright nasty about it. Once upon a time, a member of a church I was serving in another state accused me of serious wrongs I had not committed. And to add insult to injury, this person made these accusations behind my back. My guess is that you've had people like that in your life as well. You may have made someone your enemy by speaking your truth, or someone may have become your enemy without any legitimate cause. Either way, you had an enemy within your gates, and you were forced to decide how to respond. Well, this brings us back to the response Jesus urges upon his followers. He calls us to love our enemies. Now, as Mark Twain suggests, it's not hard to understand the meaning of Jesus' words. It's not hard to understand that an enemy is anyone who means to do us serious harm. And by this definition, it's not hard to recognize that we've all made or had enemies. The hard part is to treat our enemies as Jesus commands us to treat them. Notice, Jesus' saying is not couched as friendly advice that we can either take or leave. No, it's a command. And a command implies that he is asking us to do something that doesn't come naturally, that goes against the grain of instinct or habit. Years ago, when that church member accused me of wrongdoing I'd never done, I was deeply hurt and angry. My first impulse was not only to defend myself, but to lash back at her. I wanted to give her a taste of her own medicine. And what, pray tell, did Jesus have to say about my plans? Well, instead of giving me the license to strike back, he commanded me to do good to my accuser, to bless her and to pray for her, the one who had treated me so unjustly. In that situation, it wasn't hard to understand what Jesus was asking of me. It was hard to do what he was asking of me. However, I can think of one thing that is hard to understand about Jesus' command. A question that baffles our minds and gnaws at our guts. The question is, why? Why does Jesus ask us to love our enemies? When people defame our character or treat us like dirt, what good reason do we have for treating them any differently? For offering them grace rather than judgment? Well, Jesus actually gives two reasons. First, you and I are called to be gracious because God is gracious. But when Jesus says to love our enemies, he's not asking us to elevate our human nature. He's asking us to imitate the divine nature. He reminds us that God is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. And you and I might think this quality of God is quite admirable. But God's kindness is not something just to be admired, it's something to be emulated. Jesus says, be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. When you and I are treated harshly or unjustly, we rightly ask, why should we love our enemies rather than give them exactly what they deserve? And Jesus answers, because God loves those who are undeserving. The radical nature of grace finds its reason in God and not in the merits of its recipients. You and I are to treat other people not only as we wish to be treated, but as God treats all people, even those who are God's enemies. The second reason Jesus commands us to love our enemies follows naturally from the first. God is our role model for love. And God knows better than anyone else that there is only one way to bring reconciliation to broken relationships. And that is to interrupt the cycle of attack and counterattack with an injection of love and forgiveness. When you stop and think about it, this is how God reconciled the world in Jesus Christ. The Bible documents how, from the very beginning, humanity was hostile to God, alienated from God, behaving like enemies of God. There were times when God reacted harshly by pronouncing judgment and meting out punishment on rebellious humanity. But in the fullness of time, you might say God adopted a different strategy. Instead of giving us the treatment that enemies deserve, either by giving us the cold shoulder or blasting us off the face of the planet, God took the initiative to offer mercy and make peace through Jesus Christ. And lo and behold, the strategy worked. For all who accepted this gift of grace, the result was reconciliation with God. By the sheer force of love, God made friends out of former enemies. In a similar way, Jesus calls us to love our enemies because he sees the same potential for healing in our broken relationships with other people. It is only through love and forgiveness that hostility between the two parties can be brought to an end. Of course, our natural response to being mistreated is to return like for like, to mimic the behavior of those who would victimize us. But Jesus teaches us how not to be a victim, how to take charge of our lives and the situation by taking the initiative in loving, caring, and giving. And when we do, what seems impossible actually becomes possible. The potential is created for making friends of our enemies. I should emphasize the word potential because there are no guarantees. The strategy of love doesn't always work. I eventually tried that strategy with a church member who put a target on my back many years ago. At first, I simply avoided her, allowing myself to cool off and hoping she would cool off as well. But I finally realized it was my responsibility as her pastor to reach out to her and attempt to reconcile. I made an appointment to see her and tried my best to listen to her grievances and to love her in return. What I discovered is that she had not cooled off. She was just as hot under the collar and critical of me as ever. Nothing I said helped to lower the temperature of her spirit. When I left that church a couple of years later, she still wasn't speaking to me. I was reminded that in any attempt at reconciliation, it takes two to tango. But that situation reminded me of something else. It takes at least one to tango for reconciliation even to be a possibility. Unless someone takes the initiative to break the cycle of hostility and create the potential for peace, enemies are doomed to remain enemies. And this is why Jesus commands us to love our enemies. He knows that if we have any hope of making friends of our enemies, we first have to be their friends. Now, I usually begin my sermons with a biblical principle and conclude them with a contemporary illustration, right? Perhaps a story you can relate to and apply to your own experience. But today I'm making an exception to my own rule. The most powerful example of reconciliation I know of anywhere is found in the Bible itself. In fact, it's contained in today's Old Testament. Joseph is the youngest of 12 sons of the Hebrew patriarch Jacob. Earlier in the book of Genesis, Joseph is pictured as a spoiled brat of a boy who incites the jealousy of his older brothers. They sell him into slavery, where he not only survives, but prospers. His special talents and skills take him, as he says, to the second highest office in all of Egypt. The entire region, including Egypt, is now suffering from the period of famine foreseen by Joseph in dreams. So, the brothers come to Egypt looking for food. Unbeknownst to them, the public official to whom they make their plea is their estranged younger brother. Joseph recognizes his brothers, but they don't recognize him. I mean, the tension in the story is almost unbearable. How will this long-standing conflict be resolved? When Joseph identifies himself, his brothers are terrified. Will Joseph, who is now so powerful, repay them with what they did to him? Well, the brothers quickly learn what we, the readers, know already, that Joseph will forgive him. Now, he may do this in part because he is no longer a pampered, arrogant, selfish boy. He has become a generous, compassionate, and mature man. But there's clearly another factor at work here. Joseph gives what amounts to a theological explanation for his attitude and his actions. God sent me before you to preserve life. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth. And so, the movement of events in Joseph's life, so transparent on a human level, is the expression of a gracious, divine purpose, which only in the end becomes plain. Joseph demonstrates the person who understands and has confidence in God's providential care is able to love even enemies. And what's more, to make friends of those enemies. In his famous sermon, Jesus prescribes an action which seems totally illogical and impossible to do. Many centuries earlier, Joseph shows us why and how it's possible to do it. God is full of grace, and the final word of grace is to make us gracious